by making choices, you're executing how you want your life to go. And as we already mentioned, like power and choice are related. So it's kind of like, this is your power to shape your life. And to me, that applies to everything. Life is feeling and choice for everybody and for everything. So no matter what's going on, if you look at it like, okay, in this situation, what am I feeling and what choices are available? And then that's how, and by doing that, if you're always doing that, you're kind of maximizing your life. You're living as much as you can. And you're creating not just a life where you're steering here and there, you're steering every instant of every day to create this path that's unique for you, that you can look back on and be like, that's my life. I didn't let someone else dictate it. I followed what I felt, and I made choices for what I wanted it to become.
You're listening to the Establishing Your Empire Show, a podcast that inspires entrepreneurs, creatives, and future business owners to pursue their passions, grow their organizations, and build their empire. My name is Daran Herrman, and creatively, I'm best known for my photography, but business-wise, my claim to fame is growing a company from $15K per month in online sales to breaking the $1 million a month barrier. And I'm sitting down with interesting people to talk about their process, the lessons they've learned, and how they have established their empires. All right, Benjamin, thank you so much for being on the Establishing Your Empire podcast. Real excited to have you today. Met you through beach volleyball, kind of here in this great Austin scene, but I've checked out some of your YouTube videos, and I think right now is a great time to hear your message with COVID happening, a lot of people being stuck inside. Very close corners. So why don't you start, just kind of give us an overview of who you are and what you're doing right now.
Okay. So I spent 15 years as a mechanical engineer in California. And through that whole time, I was very much in the mindset of like science, rationality, and everything was very clearly delineated for right, wrong, improper, proper, etc.
Yes, no, on, off, right?
Yes, and I always was committed to being on the right side of things, being correct, etc. And despite the fact that over years I was becoming less and less happy, I would say, and I was completely unaware of that. So in that time, I was trying to make changes in my life, but I would lean on things like changing my diet or changing my sleep schedule or exercising more and doing all these kind of external things to kind of improve my life. But as you can guess, doesn't solve all your problems. Some things get better, some things don't. And so during that time, I ended up meeting the woman who is now my wife, and we met just through OkCupid, and we were just dating casually. And she has an interesting history where about 3 years before that, she had been in South America just traveling around. And she just by chance wandered to an ayahuasca retreat center, and she just heard about it and said, "Oh, I'm gonna go to this place." And she went, and not only did they do ayahuasca, but they did all this like heavy emotional work, and it like changed her life. As soon as she left, she's like, "I'm moving to San Francisco, and I'm going to acupuncture school." And so she did that, and then a few years later, I meet her, and so that mindset that she had around emotions and stuff was already kind of in her. So I was getting exposed to it with her. And then one of the people who worked at that ayahuasca center, his name's Ferdinand, he actually left there and then moved back to the San Francisco area. So then they would hang out, and then I would hang out with them. And so Ferdinand was one of like the leaders at that place. And so he was like an expert on helping people deal with their emotions, dealing with their traumas, all these things. And so pretty quickly, Ferdinand is kind of, I should say, kind of confronting some of my emotional things.
Yeah, because you would wonder, like an engineer with somebody who's more in touch with their emotional side, sometimes that doesn't sound like a very good match, right?
Yeah, very much. Well, the fascinating thing is that my wife, despite getting into some of these emotional things, she was never overtly emotional. Like it exposed some things, but she didn't suddenly become really emotional or anything. And it turned out through interesting observation that I was kind of more emotional than her. But I was always just suppressing it. So like the emotions were there and they're always under the surface, but I was always like, they don't exist. I'm pretending like I don't even see them. And so I was just more and more frustrated, like in my career and whatnot, but I would never admit it. I would always be like, oh, the next job, it's going to be the one I really want. And I always told myself, oh, I'm going to start my own company eventually, and then I'll have it all figured out. So it's always something down the road that's going to fix it. So as I was working with Ferdinand and my wife for that matter, a lot of my emotional things would come up. And I started realizing just how frustrated I was in all aspects of my life, and realized like a lot of the emotions I was avoiding for decades, basically. And so we talk about them. They would expose a lot of emotions I didn't know were there. And to Ferdinand's credit, like Ferdinand is amazing at this, but he also comes from a background where he was a software engineer for a long time. So like he's also got that engineering kind of rational, logical mindset to help him connect to me. So he was easy. It was easy for him to actually talk to me on my terms and bring me along to where I could actually address my emotions. So a few years, like a year or so of doing that, then he convinced me to go to an ayahuasca ceremony. And I shouldn't even say convince me. He just said, hey, there's one happening with someone I know. Would you like to go? And my first thought was, no way, I'm not doing that. I never thought I would do psychedelics or anything like that. And as soon as like I had that emotional response of like, absolutely not, a part of me said, oh, I have to do it now. So I went and did that. And that was kind of like, I would say kind of a pivotal turning moment of like, I'm willing to go down this new path. Like I'm really going down it. And it's hard because a lot of this new path means actually like giving up certain things about who I thought I was, about who I've been, the choices I've made, and actually just saying, oh, I'm going to chart a path away from what I was on.
Yeah, different story, because we all have these stories about ourselves, so who we are. And those could be positive stories, they could be negative stories, they could be in between, right?
Yeah.
Like very simply, like when people talk about, oh, I tried quitting smoking, but I'm a smoker, right?
Yeah.
That's a story that they're constantly reinforcing. So why don't you continue like down your path? So what happened next?
So I went into the ayahuasca the one time, and then Christine, my wife, Ferdinand, and I, we kind of wanted to start doing little like emotional like sessions at our house, and we'd bring some people that we knew over and talk about emotions, and we would just like pick one emotion for the day and we'd discuss it and bring up what we think about it, our experiences with it, etc. And then we do this like breathing meditation. That's like this really intense breathing, and the whole point is to kind of raise your kind of energy, we should say, which is pretty a vague term to use, but it's just like it gets you worked up kind of. And then if while you're worked up, you start to like think about the emotion and kind of imagine experiences with that, you start to feel it really intensely. And so we did things like shame, fear. We did one on just death, a whole variety of things. And they all expose and bring up things that we've been kind of hiding or avoiding our whole life. And
is this like just a day, a weekend, a week? Like what? How long is this deal?
They would be between 4 and like 6 hours.
But like for this whole, like would you do back-to-back days?
Oh no, yeah, it'd just be like just this Sunday we're doing it. We invite some people over we think would be interested, and we'll do it. And
so in a few hours you could get into this to where like you're getting deep into thinking about death or your relationship with death and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Wow, intense.
And death is a fascinating one because it was like one of actually the most delightful ones for me. Some people had a hard time with it. For me, it was actually, and I think I think we all have weird concepts of what death is and what it is. But once I actually got into that like emotional state, it was actually, because death as in your life ending is kind of scary. But we also have all these small deaths of like parts of us die and then we move on to something else. And often a part of us has to die to become something else. So most of my experience in that meditation was around like letting go of letting parts of me die so I can be something else. And so that in that sense, it was like relieving. It's like letting a weight off my shoulders. But back to it. So we did that for a while. We probably did like 10 or 12 of those sessions with different people. And we started feeling like we're to eventually make this into like an organization. And we're going to hold like several day workshops and we're going to start doing more of that stuff. But I still had my job. My wife was in acupuncture school still, and she was coming near the end of it. And then I actually went to Peru to that same ayahuasca place that Ferdinand worked at and that my wife went to. And I actually did like the full 10-day experience there. And that was life-changing, where I came back and I immediately proposed to my wife. And so it was like, just as it happened with her, of like realizing, oh, this is what I want to do for my life and I'm going to do it. I kind of had the same sort of experience, like, oh, this is what I want out of life. I'm doing it. Before then, I thought I would probably never get married. I thought I would probably never want kids. And it was just like a few emotional experiences, realized that I was afraid to have kids because I thought I would be a bad father. Like ultimately that was the obstacle. And so once I like thought like, oh, I could be a good father. Then suddenly I'm like, oh yeah, I totally want kids. And I thought like I would never have a wife because I thought that no one would ever understand me, and not enough to get married to them, I thought. And then I start realizing that she already understands me enough, and we're actually able to connect on levels I didn't think people could connect with on at all. And so already I'm like, okay, the presumptions, the stories I had created around who I was and about other people and my relationship with them were completely bogus. So once I let them go,
that's a big journey. So like, to kind of draw it back a little bit, which is amazing, by the way. And I do a lot of things that I feel like I can get there too, because of just asking yourself a bunch of questions and understanding why you fear some questions and stuff like that. But like, how does somebody actually go from, and I know it's a bold, big question, but of understanding that they fear being a dad to being excited about it, right?
Yeah.
Any insights you could give there? Because that's pretty intense. And sorry for the hard question, but
oh no, it's a great question. So it seems like a big jump, but it happened over about 2 days actually. And it was basically, so at this ayahuasca retreat, I don't think there's any other ayahuasca retreat like it. And actually they don't do ayahuasca there anymore. They decided that they don't need the medicine to do some of these emotional work. But when I was there, they did. And so you talk to people in like a group setting about like what's going on. And the person in charge, he's like trying to figure out basically what's holding you back. What's your obstacle? What beliefs are you holding on to that are holding you back? And he is amazing at this. And like Ferdinand is amazing at as well. But so he's looking at that and he was clearly finding that I have kind of issues with my father, and I'm viewing my father a certain way. And specifically, I was viewing him kind of in a negative light. And my relationship with my father wasn't as good as it could be as well. And part of my fear, and I was like, because I was viewing my father in a negative light, I was also afraid of being him and becoming him. And so a big part of the first ayahuasca ceremony was basically all about that. And I actually got to the realization that my father was actually a fantastic father. Like, he was amazing. I'm going through in this ceremony, I'm going through all these experiences with my father and my mother and stuff growing up. And I'm jumping like from one experience with my father to the next. And I'm like looking for the quote unquote bad experiences that would explain why I have this negative view. And I'm jumping from experience to experience. I'm like, no, that's actually a great experience. No, that one's great. Wait, that one's great. And that one's great. And then there was this actual moment where I actually could see my father, like me going to like Little League baseball, like real small, and my dad walking with his like hand on my back, like taking me there, and I could just see it, and I just like immediately start bawling. Mm-hmm. I'm just crying like uncontrollably for like 30 minutes or something. And it's just like this realization that my dad was actually a great father. He was there for me the whole time. He was there to help me do all these things and present and everything. And I was like, so like it completely changed my relationship with him. And as soon as like after that, they had me write a letter to my father telling him all this stuff, and it like really made us connect a lot more. And as soon as I saw that, like, oh, my dad was actually a great father, I'd love to be as good a father as him. So then, yeah, it was immediate. So like all these pieces just start falling into place. And so that's where it was like, being on the receiving end of that and appreciating and seeing how amazing that is, you're like, oh yeah, I would love to have a child and be able to bring that to my child as well.
And I think our takeaway there is you were going through it, as opposed to, like you were saying before, just suppressing those feelings and just believing that story is the truth. You were diving into it to actually question it. Why do you feel this way? Why is this the truth? Is it just some kind of fight or relationship battle or power struggle that gets me to dislike, or maybe not dislike, but not be as strong a relationship as it should be, right? Yeah. That's very interesting. So I'll let you continue on your journey or your story here. Go ahead.
So one thing you just mentioned actually about what is the truth and whatnot. One thing we say in our organization of me, my wife, and Ferdinand is that the truth is what you feel. So it really is like someone could tell you something. They could tell you even a fact about reality, or like so-and-so said this to someone. And if you don't feel it's true, you're not going to actually believe it. So there's this, and that actually explains kind of like you have to be open to accepting differences from what you already think. But also it means that I could tell you all day long, like, you have issues with your mother, you have issues with your father, you this or that. And you're going to say, no, I don't. No, I don't. But if you actually go through the experience of like imagining it and feeling it, then you're like going to, oh, that's totally true. And now I can't deny it at all.
And one thing I always say, which is very similar to what you're saying there, but shortened version is perception is reality. The way you perceive something is your reality, whether it's actually truth or not. And then that's more, I usually say that more in like a marketing term way in a business sense, but the same is true as you yourself as a person, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the things that are happening now in our culture right now, many people look at the same situation and we all draw different conclusions from it and whatnot. It's the Rashomon effect of everyone seeing the same thing and interpreting it completely different. And I think I think so many people know it. Like they know it intellectually, but again, I don't know if they feel it enough to where that every situation they actually apply that. Be like, oh yeah, this is my perception of this. This person standing next to me has a different perception. I'm going to engage with them so I understand their perception because then I can actually relate to them.
Yeah, no, that'd be a key. I think that's something that I wish we had all a little better talent with is to truly listen to the person next to you, whether that's physically or virtually next to you, and be able to be open to what their stance is, as opposed to just trying to prove what you want to say right. You know, I think that's very common. And, you know, we have now these big soapboxes like social media to where we can really find the same group of people that think the same way very easily. And it becomes even harder to listen to somebody else's thoughts or feelings or even the way they see what's going on. Whether this is in big life as in the United States or even, you know, what's happening right next to you with the people in your little community or group of people. But
yeah,
I think that's super intense. So, so let's just keep going down your path because I love where we're going here. I think there's going to be a lot of takeaways here.
Okay. So after I left Peru and came back, got engaged to my wife. 6 months or so after that, we basically decided we're done with San Francisco, and we're going to actually quit our jobs basically and go try to do this emotional stuff at a bigger scale. And at the time, we actually we went over to Oakland one like Sunday afternoon and set up this booth by a lake, just a table. And we put up a microphone and we just sat there and put a sign up that said, "Come talk to us about emotions." And we're just like, let's see if anyone stops. Before we're even done setting up, people are stopping and be like, "Oh, we want to talk about emotions? What are you doing? What are you guys up to?" And people would all day, people would just come by, stop, they'd sit down and just chat. And within minutes, they're talking about their serious issues. And it's often the case, it's easier to talk to a stranger about your issues than people you actually know. And so many people said that. They're like, these are things I haven't told anybody. And now they're telling complete strangers with a microphone there too. It was kind of bizarre. So at the end of that, we're like, this is amazing. We'll be able to like get so many followers and people interested by doing something like this. And so when we left San Francisco, we spent the summer living in New Mexico, and it was all just like to create content. We're like, we're going to create some online content, maybe a podcast, maybe online coursework. We're going to create all this stuff. And then after the summer, we'll like move somewhere else and then try to bring this out there. So we spent the summer in Taos, and it was a lot harder than we thought. So we like struggled constantly with like, what is our message? What emotion are we going to talk about first? And we came up with all these ideas, and we basically settled on confidence. It's like, if you go into like fear or shame or sadness, that's really hard for people. Like step in and say, "Hey, I just met you, but I want you to get into your shame right now." Mm-hmm. It's like people just want to run away. So confidence is one that, oh yeah, everyone kind of wants to feel more confident. So I was like, this is a great one. It has the consequence of going into your confidence means actually kind of tapping into your insecurities at the same time. So it's still not completely necessarily easy, but it's approachable.
But you hear the word and like, oh, I could make more money if I'm more confident. I could do so many more things, you know? And it means something different to everybody, confidence, but I think that's a great place to start. A little easier.
Yeah. So we spent like the summer having countless discussions about confidence. Like we were meditating every day and thinking about confidence, and we started writing kind of an online coursework. And that's what we thought. We're like, oh, make this course to introduce people to it, to introduce them to our ideas around confidence. And more than anything about the course were like activities. Like with the idea that I said about you have to feel it for you to believe it. It's like we could tell you all this stuff about confidence and you could agree intellectually, but it doesn't actually make you change your behavior unless you actually feel the truth of it. So we're like, we have to make them do activities with this coursework to actually feel it. So we spent all summer trying to figure that stuff out. And at the end of the summer, we're like, where would we go? What's the right place? And we debated, and then it just hit us. We're like, Austin. Obviously, we should go to Austin. It's going to be a great place. There's like startup community kind of things. People are interested in wellness and health. And so we got here in last September. We almost immediately started holding these booths, and nobody stopped. We were getting nobody. And it was weird because we'd set up these booths. People would stop and say, like, what are you guys interested? What are you guys here for? And we'd tell them, they go, oh, that's cool. And they'd walk away.
It is interesting, though, because there's a lot of tourists here, too. So you wonder how many people you get are true Austinites, and maybe so, too. I don't know.
Yeah, it was fascinating. And it was sort of discouraging at the time because we thought, oh, we're going to build like a huge community of people here just by hosting these things. But we quickly got discouraged that it's not as easy as we thought. So we then kind of went deeper into the coursework and think, well, maybe we'll just push more of an online presence at first and get people that way. And so that's kind of where we started putting our effort. And we ran into problems for a while in that we found that the three of us had different kind of energy about us. And we started realizing, what we should do is we should each put out our own stuff. So our organization of the three of us is called The Internal Work. And it's kind of like our philosophy on how to approach our internal world and how to kind of dive into our emotions. But we each have our own kind of manifestation of it. We realize that there's people that are going to resonate with me that won't resonate with my wife. And there's people she'll resonate with that won't resonate with me. And so we actually decided each to put out our own stuff. And so my wife is working on an online course herself. And I've been putting out these videos on YouTube to kind of just talk about various things. And so far, I haven't touched confidence in them yet, but I'll get there. But so that I'm putting these out there basically just to start getting people interested in kind of what we're doing. And then as we start to get a following, I think then we'll start putting out online courses and whatnot. And the other thing I'm working on the side right now is a mobile game.
Oh, interesting.
And this game, and I have no experience making a mobile app or game or anything. But the game it's a game, but it's mostly about emotions. Like that's the intent. It's a vehicle for kind of delivering the content with the idea if it's going to be completely audio based. It's like there's going to be nothing on the screen, and you're going to wear headphones, and you'll like push the screen in a couple places to make choices. But it's mostly about like going through a story that tries to get you to feel certain emotions, and then kind of has the characters interacting in a way that they can start to understand these emotions in kind of the way we see them. And so
I love that. I remember way back in the day, and I grew up like Windows 3.1 and DOS is what I learned on. But I used to actually make these games that were only text based, and you got to make decision trees, right?
Yeah.
And you end up failing or keep going or whatever. Or I think those are still fun. Not all games need to be super graphically heavy, especially with this one, because I think audio. Obviously, because I'm on the podcast, but I think audio is very, very powerful for our future.
Yeah.
Because video's amazing. And trust me, I have a photo video company since 2009. But what I see with audio is I'm able to get into it in a different way. I can close my eyes. I can go for a walk. Video is very hard to get in that space sometimes. Yeah. I have a great relationship with songs because there's certain emotions I can get really amped up, or I can get really chilled down or whatever. And a video sometimes will change that because I think there's so many different things that you're internalizing with your brain, whereas you can kind of quiet it down with audio.
Yeah,
I think it'll be a lot of fun. But I do want to ask you a question about one of the videos that you've put out is about anger, and one of the things that I really have a big takeaway that I've had, and I think I already knew it, but it really made me think about it is. A lot of times you have anger when you have a feeling of no powerlessness. So maybe go into, it didn't have to be that direction, but tell us a little bit about anger.
Yeah. So we've kind of spent years diving into these emotions, and some of them we have spent more time with others. And anger is one of the quintessential one because everyone experiences anger a lot, frankly. And when it comes to an emotion, if you ask someone, hey, what is anger? Most people kind of like sit there and freeze because they're like, oh yeah, I say I'm angry and I experience anger, but I really don't know how to describe it. And then they'll come up with some things. And if you go to Wikipedia and look up anger or any other dictionary, like it says a lot of stuff about it, and a lot of it's useful and interesting. But we have this goal of like breaking it down to its most simplest form. And so for anger, whenever you feel anger, like there's always a sense of feeling powerless at the same time. And I won't go so far as to say anger is powerlessness, but you will feel powerless when you're angry. And I mean, people shouldn't just take my word for it. They should investigate their own anger. And like next time you're angry, like think like, do I feel powerless about something? And look for what it might be that you're feeling powerless about. And you can ask yourself, am I really powerless in this situation? And generally the true answer is no, I'm usually not. And so it's like you said about stories. It's like there's a story that I'm powerless, and anger is kind of the physical, intellectual, kind of symbolic expression of feeling powerless in that situation. And so I actually describe it as the situation where a part of you automatically wants to do things and like wants to like, oh, I don't like that chair is there. So you automatically like, oh, I'm going to go move the chair. Like you just automatically assume you can. And then you get over, then the chair is actually 400 pounds. And you're like, oh, I can't actually move it. And so if you still want the chair moved, even though it's 400 pounds, you kind of are stuck. Like I actually have to like go find 2 other people to help me move this chair, or I just got to be cool with the chair being there. And so you do have these choices of how you want to move forward. But if you're angry, you sit there and just stare at the chair and you're like, you're not where I want you to be. And and that's what anger is. It's this like, I want it to be different than it is, but I can't do anything about it. And if you sit there and just believe the story that you can't do anything about it, then you stay angry. And eventually you get to the point of, if you don't like being in that energy of anger, you go to like blaming. Like, okay, well, it's someone else's fault that the chair's here, and then you can blame them, and then you ideally will let it go and be like, okay, I guess the chair's going to stay there, but it's their fault. I don't have to take responsibility for the chair being there. It's someone else's fault. But the reality is, as kind of the story goes, like you do have choices about what you do. And the choices can be go get other people to help you move it. They are to rearrange the rest of the furniture so the chair fits in then, or to just be like, oh, I'm okay with the chair for now. I'll go take care of it later. These are all choices that you have. And pretty much any of those choices will alleviate the powerlessness, because by you making a choice and following through with it, you will be saying, no, I am powerful. I'm not a victim of this chair being there. And that's where kind of the resolution of anger is kind of stepping through that idea of, am I powerless? What am I powerless about? How do I gain power? And that's actually by taking responsibility and making choices about the situation, which actually gets to like, to me, one of the biggest observations is that power is responsibility. And again, don't just take my word for it, like try to feel it out and look at your life when you feel powerful. I think you'll find that it's when you're taking responsibility. And a lot of times it feels like you don't even notice it. You'll be in a situation where you're in charge of something and you're taking care of everything, and it just feels like naturally flowing. Like, oh, I'm doing this, I'm taking care of this. And if you sat there and thought like, oh yeah, I'm taking responsibility for what's going on, and I'm making choices, and yeah, ultimately I'm powerful. I'm actually like creating the world I want to create around me. I'm turning my life into what I want it to be. And it could be something small like moving furniture, or it could be I'm in charge of a company and I'm making that happen, or whatever.
I think that's very interesting. When I go back on the anger, I get angry very unoften. But I have noticed that it is a feeling of lack of options, or that something happened and I didn't have any control over it or whatever. So I think a great exercise for me, just to take away from that, would be to actually take a look at what the options I do have and think about that. And I think that would just flow my energy in a different place, right? As opposed to being angry and lashing out to somebody, or dwelling over the problem. Let's figure out some solutions, which I like that anyway. Anytime that I feel stuck or whatever, I just start doing something. I like to create some action, because it starts, you never know what's going to come up with it. But talk to me. I like this responsibility thing. I think there's a lot of people out there that, especially nowadays, there's a lot of jobs that are kind of soulless, data, very, very, very low level jobs. And I feel like a lot of people, if they did have more responsibility, even if it was, hey, I'm a plumber and I got to fix that thing and I own that thing and it's my responsibility to have that fixed. I do feel like a lot of people would be more happy if they even just had more responsibilities. Mm-hmm. I don't know, maybe, and you gave a great explanation earlier, but any more that you can dive into responsibility? Because I think it's a very interesting subject.
Yeah. So responsibility is a very fascinating one. My wife and I, it's tricky because responsibility is kind of the ultimate resolution to anger, but responsibility is so much more than just that. Every issue that you look at least one piece of it can be related to responsibility. That's actually what I've found. So no matter what's going on, if someone is in fear, in anger, in shame, sadness, whatever it is, there's no matter what is wrong to them, there is a piece of responsibility that's kind of under the whole thing. And as a culture, there's a huge kind of, I would go so far as to say, a fear of taking responsibility. Like, and I think it can go two ways. One, it can go in that if you take responsibility, if something goes wrong, it's your fault. And that's kind of true. And the reality is people don't want to be at fault. They don't want to fail. They don't want to be blamed for what's going wrong. So of course they're like, unless I can guarantee it's going to work out well, I don't want to touch that thing. And then the other side is there's a real narrative in our culture, both intellectually and emotionally, of like disliking power. They look at people who are like, you're in power, therefore you are bad. And it's coming from a place of they're feeling powerless themselves. So the person who they perceive as powerful, they are they're the kind of persecutor and you're the victim. And that's kind of this dynamic that's just playing out in our society all over the place. That there must be someone who's holding me back because I feel like a victim. And so anyone you perceive as being in power is the problem, basically. And so there's a real sense of like power is bad. And just if you look at all the ways in social media, wherever that people talk about power, it's rarely in a kind of positive light. It's always like these are positions of power, they're doing the wrong thing, yada, yada. When really like power just means effectively like you have the ability to make change, I would say, or just to do something. That means you're powerful. And we all want to be powerful. Or I think we should all want to be powerful. But people, if you've been told for years that people in power are bad, a part of you is going to say, well, I shouldn't be powerful because that would make me bad. So there's a lot of things around power and responsibility that have all this baggage around them.
I think it's similar relationship with money people have. A lot of money is bad. Well, to me, money's fuel. So, I mean, just that relationship with money needs to change. Like, some people will take money and they'll use it unwisely or poorly or frivolously or whatever acronym you want to use. But like to me, like money, if you want to create big change, you need money because that's the fuel to do it. Like, so my relationship is quite different. And, and I don't see as, I want to accumulate all this money. I want to be able to have my snowball effect be as big as possible and get a bigger and bigger snowball to do more things, bigger things.
Yeah.
Talk to me about meditation. Like, do you have a certain form that you like to do? Do you use an app? Like what just give me any stories you want in that direction.
So, I mean, in my years of trying to kind of improve my life in various ways before I met Ferdinand and Christine, I would do meditation a few times. I mean, I did all those, all the biohacking, all that stuff. I went down all those avenues, and meditating really didn't land with me really in any real way. And it was only about, we did this breathing meditation thing, and it was, when you do it, you basically just lay down on your back, and we have everybody who's there breathing in sync, and we have like you breathing intensely, like deep breaths, and it goes, and like someone's in charge, like guiding everybody and leading everyone to breathe more and more intensely. And it gets frankly kind of overwhelming at some point where you're breathing as basically as hard as you can to some extent, and not to the level of like you're running a sprint race, but kind of just like a marathon where you're breathing intensely, but for a while. And it basically over-oxygenates your blood and all these things that kind of, you get to nearly a euphoric state. And that allows you access to emotions. So we did that, and it almost like forces you into a certain type of meditative state by doing that. And it's very valuable and it's very interesting. And I don't know if you know Wim Hof.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds very similar to his very similar to the Wim Hof method.
Yeah, I mean, he usually has you sit up straight and has you do things like hold your breath and stuff like that. but the same like biological things are kind of happening, but we have you lay down. So it's just trying to like, as things are happening, you're just going inside to your emotions when you do it. So that was my first introduction to like meditation that's actually impactful. But then last summer when we were in Taos, we went to like, we all committed to being like, we're going to do a daily meditation, and not all together, but just it was that. And at first, Ferdinand has years of experience meditating, where he's done like 9 Vipassana retreats and all these things. So he's kind of trying to guide us on how to meditate. And one of the things we did, which I think is extremely valuable for people who want to meditate, is having just discussing the meditation afterwards. So we'd meditate for 45 minutes, and it was like definitely on the verge of mindfulness, where it's like just focus on your breath and just focus there. And as thoughts come up, let them pass through. As sensations come up, just allow them and don't get wrapped up in them. And that's like the first step for a while. And a lot of these thoughts are coming up are intentionally to distract you. They're like trying to get you to like, oh, get up and go do something. Don't do here. You don't want to do this. And it's like, okay, you got to allow those things so they're no longer in charge. Be comfortable with them happening so they no longer have power over you. And eventually it starts quieting down. And eventually it can be like 3 or 4 days of doing this, from my experience. And then you get to the place where like, now that you're allowing whatever happens, now when you're sitting there, like emotions will come up and you can feel them. And it's tricky because I think both psychedelics and the breathing meditation helped me kind of get a sense for these things. So even in a normal meditation that I do every morning, I'll sit there for like, even like in less than 5 minutes sometimes, I'll start to get an emotion that comes up. And it could be just a pure emotion, like I just feel sad right now. And then I'll like allow the sadness and actually try to amplify it, which is really vague to describe what that feels like. But then see what like thoughts pop up. Like what stories? I start imagining a story about something, like why is that story there? And it really kind of, by following the story or the thought that pops up, you start to get an idea of what's been going on with you. And it seems it's very much to me like dreams, where like you wake up and you're like, oh, I had this dream of this thing, and oh, I'm having that dream because this thing in my life is going on, and it all makes sense. Similar, what's coming up in your meditation is a reflection of what you're experiencing as well. And so I definitely get a lot out of it. And one of the interesting things is, for a long time thinking meditation's boring. Like there's this idea of it being boring. And at this point, I could frankly meditate for hours and not be bored at all. And it's really weird. Like I know that somebody who has not gotten there would be like, I don't believe it. That's bonkers. But I observed this like a couple months ago. I just realized when I was meditating of like, I guess I should stop because I actually do have things to do today, but I could sit here for another hour and sometimes my mind is completely blank and it's just feeling sensations. But the boredom to me is like, it's a tool for your subconscious to distract you. It's like, I'm so bored. Stop doing this. And a lot of our things, when you're investigating our emotions and stuff, whenever we're exploring in ayahuasca, in the breathing meditation, or just regular meditation, we always take this mindset that you want to follow the emotion. So if you're asking yourself a question like, what is death? And you're in this meditative state, you might get this answer and it feels right. But we always say it's not the answer that feels right. It's the answer that makes you feel. Because whatever feels right is like, oh, it's this thing over here, and you go follow it, and now you're over in la la land in this, oh, it's this thing. But if you go to this other answer and you get really intense and you start like shaking and you're like, you know that there's like a part of your subconscious believes there's something important here. And so it's always like, go towards the heavy emotion, whatever emotion it is. And so in like the everyday meditation, it's a similar thing. And boredom will come in as a way to kind of distract you. Like, oh, I'm getting close to something serious, a serious emotion. And these thoughts will come in, this boredom will say, oh, I'm so bored. And it's all trying to like make you look at the boredom instead of looking at like your heartache over here or your grief that's over here. I don't want to deal with this or look at this grief. Oh, this boredom. I just keep looking at the boredom, or thoughts about work. Oh, I need to go email this person. I need to do this other thing. So now your entire focus and your consciousness is over on this stuff and not on this grief that really needs to be addressed.
Like a defense mechanism almost. So how does one start? Like what would you recommend to somebody just to start meditating, just in general? Like,
So this is very fascinating for two things. One is, so Ferdinand actually made a couple, like he planned to make several videos to explain his version of meditating, which he called consciousness breath meditation. And we posted them we posted the first two on YouTube. And so they're very informative. So I think those are actually a good place to look at. And he talks about the benefits of it, and like some of the major benefits are things like there's the benefits of what you can experience during it, but also the ability to, like, if you can stay conscious and focused during a meditation, you start to be able to do that in your everyday life. So we have things that come up, these thoughts that come up, or emotions where you just get riled up and you start reacting. And whenever that happens, you basically aren't in charge anymore. Like, someone said this thing and now I'm like so focused on them, and it's like I've been possessed. I've been taken over. I'm no longer in charge. This emotion is in charge. And the meditation is kind of teaching you to, like, these things happen and you're learning, oh, I'm in charge no matter what things are going on. I can decide to follow them if I want, but I still get to decide. And you can then take that to your everyday life once you start to get good at it, or you'll naturally do that, actually. So Ferdinand goes over some of those benefits and whatnot in his video. The other interesting part of it is that the game I'm making, the whole idea actually of the game is that it's a person who's basically frustrated in their life, and they, like, things are going fine in their life. It's actually reasonably modeled on what my life was like. It's like, I have a good job, I have an okay social life, like everything seems fine, but I'm actually not fulfilled or happy. And I just keep you like circling in the same loop in your life, and you're just like, And so this person in this story, that's what they're going through, and they get exposed to a meditation teacher who's teaching them. So in this app, I'm actually having the character being taught how to meditate and all these ideas, and they're going through this meditation. And that's like the gameplay of it, is them in a meditation, sort of like trying to be centered while things are trying to distract them. And so in this game, I've been writing this game and the script for it, and it's all about writing how to describe how to meditate and whatnot.
I love it. So a lot of this stuff, okay, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to listen to this, and I probably got a little bit more of the startup, want to start a business crowd. And, but I've had people on here that are directors of movies and musicians and all that. So they're going to be like, well, okay, great. But then, that's not for me.
Yeah.
So maybe talk to me about comfort zone, and maybe that's a little bit of a confidence thing too, but like, I don't know. I think you'd probably be better to go in whatever direction you want to go in than me trying to steer it.
Yeah. So I totally get that. I mean, that was the thing I was into, like whether it was like listening to Tim Ferriss's podcast and I mean, there are countless of them that I was totally into 5-7 years ago, whatever. And I worked for 4 startups in San Francisco. I worked for one large corporation as an engineer, and then 4 startups after that of varying sizes. And so, yeah, I was totally in that startup world and feeling that and being sort of a part of and observing all like the raising money and like hustle and kind of fake it till you make it kind of stuff. Like I was in the middle of it. And a lot of it I just always felt uncomfortable with, and some of it I totally adopted and kind of expressed myself. So yeah, I experienced a lot of that stuff, and I have a lot of thoughts on a lot of that stuff. But one of the things the main narrative, I think, is that we're all emotional beings. Like I break it down to this way. Life is basically 2 things. It's feeling and choice. And they're not opposites. They kind of work together. And so everything you're doing, you're either feeling something, like physically feeling the world and getting input from the world, and you're getting the input and you're processing in different ways and feeling emotions in response to things and whatnot to help guide you on what choices to make. And then and by making choices, you're executing how you want your life to go. And as we already mentioned, like power and choice are related. So it's kind of like, this is your power to shape your life. And to me, that applies to everything. Life is feeling and choice for everybody and for everything. So no matter what's going on, if you look at it like, okay, in this situation, what am I feeling and what choices are available? And then that's how, and by doing that, if you're always doing that, you're kind of maximizing your life. You're living as much as you can. And you're creating not just a life where you're steering here and there, you're steering every instant of every day to create this path that's unique for you, that you can look back on and be like, that's my life. I didn't let someone else dictate it. I followed what I felt, and I made choices for what I wanted it to become. And so this, I think, applies to everybody. Startup people, musicians, movies. Like I really feel like once I learned about this stuff and started touching into it, I was like, oh, and I should actually jump to the thing of saying, as soon as I got into this ability to like actually feel my emotions that I've been suppressing for years, and I like fully felt them, it was basically like things going from black and white to color. Like it was just like, whoa, there's so much more to this experience than I thought possible. Like I couldn't even fathom the things that are available to us to feel. And once I did that, I was like, I was a mechanical engineer, and I was making the last thing I was working on was a 3D metal printer. And then before that was a medical device and all this stuff. And they were all cool things. Like every single one was a cool project. But as soon as I felt these emotions, I was like, this is my goal now. Help other people have this experience of going from black and white to color with their emotions. And I truly believe it applies to everybody.
So how does one start so I feel like I'm very in touch with my emotions. I'm good at like filtering through and understanding why I feel a certain way and deciding whether I want to spend energy there or not. And I don't even know the answer to this question, so I apologize if it's tough, but how does one start? Like let's say that they can't go to a big retreat, they can't do a lot of these things, or they're not there yet, one way or another. How does one start just going down this path?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I think there's a lot of them. And I think that's sort of what my videos are hoping to do is I just picked random topics that I could just start talking about and sharing some of these ideas. And the ones I picked first were about these things. Like one of them, the very first one was stop trying to be right. And it's all about the idea of we're too focused on being right. And we ultimately think being right will make us happier. It'll serve us. It'll make us more successful, do something. But the answer is really, the only reason you want to be right is so that you're happier or whatever. So just go straight to being happy. So it's like my choice isn't trying to be right. It's trying to make the choice that serves me, that moves me in the direction I want to go. And I think the reason why I in the video, the whole reason why I say that is that when you're trying to be right, you have to ask what determines whether you're right or not. And usually what we do is we look to the external world as our reference for what's right. And when I say right, I mean like what's correct, not like morally, but just like what's correct, what fact is true. And we tend to look to the external world because we think that's where the truth is. It's this external world outside of me that determines what's correct and what's not. But really, when it comes to my life, what's most important is where my life goes and what I'm feeling, which is inside of me. So why am I using the external world to dictate where I should go and what I should do when it's really about what I feel? And that gets down to the idea of feeling a choice. Like it almost suggests like it doesn't matter what's true, it's what you feel. It almost gets there. And but that idea is actually very toxic because it leads people to just like ignore reality. And I am against ignoring reality completely. But it is like, I need to know what's going on inside of me to even know that I can see reality properly. Like if I think people are bad, which a lot of people have this belief fundamentally that people are bad. And so they look at every situation and think that's because that person's bad or they're evil. They're doing that for a nefarious reason. When it could be just, they don't know. They could be ignorant. They could be not even aware of what they're doing. And you read it and say, it's because they're a bad person because I assume all people are bad. And so these beliefs that we have just taint everything. So if you want to know how you're tainting and how you're filtering reality when you look at it, you need to get in touch with yourself and know, okay, what do I believe? Because that's affecting everything.
Yeah, it's super intense. And I agree. You just have to question your own thoughts and reality and why you think a certain way. Like, why do I think that? Like, why is that the first thing that I jump to? Mm-hmm. Positive and negative, because it could go both ways. So what does success look like for you?
I actually don't like the term success. So one of the things that came up in our confidence investigation was there's a paradigm that most of us live in of success and failure. And we paint it in a lot of ways. Like we could say, like you can make success whatever you want. You can make it money, you can make it popularity, you can make it just I'm happy, whatever. But then we also have the opposite side, which is failure, which is the opposite of all those things. And so we see that part of the problem with confidence is just living in that paradigm, that this duality, that these two exist. Because it basically sets up to where like we want to be on this side all the time. And frankly, like failure is obviously how you learn everything. Like you didn't learn how to catch a ball by never dropping it. You never learned how to ride your bike by never falling off. Like literally the way that every step that actually moved you forward was the failure step. It wasn't the success step. But once you're in this idea of this paradigm that success and failure and success is preferred over failure, now you're like, wait, I learned everything on the failure side, but I want to be on the success side. So if you want to be there, it's basically saying, I don't want to learn. That's ultimately where it goes. So that's where like the whole idea of success and failure becomes like problematic for me.
It's similar to responsibility circle that you were kind of saying there. You don't want to be responsible for something if it could go wrong, right?
Yeah.
And give some takeaway that I got from that too is I see a lot of people, they never want to reach for that big next level, whether they're building a resume and they just kind of keep it the same. Like you're going to fail to jump 2 levels up. Like that's otherwise you'll always say maybe a little stepping stone up, but you're usually going to stay in the same level if you're not going to try something that you might fail at.
Yeah.
And most likely will a few times before you reach it up. So I can ask kind of a question in a different way, which is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And you can take it any way, the company, you, yourself, whatever it is.
So yeah, it's funny. Growing up, I had there were like 3 jobs I imagined having, or these 3 things I loved. One, I wanted to be a fighter pilot, basically because of Top Gun, exclusively. I wanted to be a movie director, so we had a video camera, and every weekend, me and my buddy were making movies and stuff.
That was me for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And so like I actually like imagined I'm going to be a movie director someday. And the third one, I actually forgot right now. Apparently I didn't want to be that bad. Oh, a rock star.
Rock star. So you wanted to wear aviators one way or another.
Yes.
Whether you're a fighter pilot, movie director, or rock star.
Yeah. So I got electric guitar as early as I could and then made noise with it. Definitely wasn't music. And I wanted, so these things I wanted to be. But when it was time for like in high school, I took some computer science classes and I got into like physics was interesting to me. And my dad was always like working on the car. So I got into mechanical things. So then I had to pick a major and I was like mechanical engineering. And I ended up loving it in a lot of ways. Like, yeah, I absolutely loved mechanical engineering and I still do. But now that I've said, okay, 15 years of mechanical engineering, I could set that aside. Maybe I'll go back to it someday. But right now I want to help people get to their emotions. And the 3 things I want to, well, 2 of the things, fighter pilot doesn't get people in their emotions really. The other 2 things are both, the whole purpose is to get people to feel something. And so I actually like tap back into that and I like really feel like, yeah, there it is. And I don't really want to be a rock star anymore. But I kind of do want to make movies. But not necessarily movies, just I want to create emotional experiences for people. And like the game that I'm describing that I'm working on, like that fits that category. And I already have like 10 games that would try to expose emotions in different ways that I already have listed that I could work on. I have ideas for like making movies or TV shows or things like that. So I know the 5-year plan is to move more into like media. And I want to say entertainment, but I don't actually want to do it for entertainment. I want to do it as like an educational experience.
Yeah, it's your version of storytelling, right? So that's these games or YouTube videos or full out, whether it goes on Netflix, those are the vehicles to tell your story and for you to connect with people emotionally. That's super powerful. So I'd be excited to see where that goes. Any like, whether this is, your current path or your previous one being mechanical engineer, any mentors along the way, any books, podcasts, anything that kind of helped you form who you are now?
Yeah. Oh, totally. So there's very few people that follow all our same thoughts. Like when we say power is responsibility, I don't know of anyone saying that. And saying anger is powerlessness, people like they dance around that idea here and there. And then other things like we have it all. We have a definition for confidence and we have definitions for shame, fear. All of these things have kind of, in the same way we do the anger one, anger is powerlessness and responsibility and all these things. We do that with like all of the emotions. And we really don't see that from anyone else at that level. Some people will have a piece of it here and a piece of it there. But the way we've put so much effort into making it a whole picture, so far we haven't found anyone that really sees the picture, at least the way we do. And there's different, nobody's wrong because they're different. They just have their own way. But some of the ones I really like on emotional stuff, I think like Dr. Gabor Mate is got great insight on people's emotions. And then who else really stands out? I mean, the most influential writer ever is Ayn Rand for me. I changed my life reading those books in college, and like I faded away from them for a while, and now getting into emotions, I actually moved back. I read them again, and I'm like, I mean, so many people hate her.
She's interesting. She goes down some tangents. So I'm a big reader. So like, what's it? Atlas Shrugged. I liked it, but I felt like she gave a little too much power to the people that were making decisions. You know, if they had too much power, if they could change the world, just a few amount of people. But they were pretty interesting. The way that her thoughts are powerful. The very big thoughts. I did get that from her books, but. But anyway, that's just a whole side tangent. I do have a couple other questions. Sorry to cut off your thought there, but you start talking about books. And I want to talk about books. Emotions, like good, bad. Like, what's your thoughts? I mean, I think a lot of people hear the word emotions and they want to attach almost negative. I think a lot of people think negative. So, any thoughts on emotions?
Oh yeah. So, the very generic way to call it is like emotions are just signals. Like that's all they are. They're telling you how your internal world is going. The same way your eyes are telling you what the room has in it, and your ears are telling you what you hear. Your emotions are saying like what your internal world is experiencing. So as signals, they're helping guide you. If you listen to them, they're guiding you on what's wrong in your life or what's not working for you. And yeah, when you feel angry, it's basically a signal saying you're powerless, and it's basically saying take responsibility, make a choice. Like if you see anger as that, when you feel it, instead of it's not bad, it's actually telling you something that is useful. If you feel sad, it's telling you something as well. Every single one of these emotions is telling you something so that you can make choices to shape your life in the way you want to shape it.
It's almost like getting cut and knowing that there's pain there.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a signal to tell you, hey, something's wrong. Take care of this.
And it's very symbolic the way our culture suppresses our emotions a lot, distracts ourselves. I mean, I'm of the mindset that 90% of what people do in a given day is to avoid what they're feeling.
Yeah, like, distraction for sure.
Netflix,
entertainment,
even work. Like people work crazy amounts of hours, or they go to the gym, or they do drugs, or they drink. Everything they're doing, it's like, I'm feeling something, I don't want to feel it, so I'm going to go do something else that overrides it. And we do that physically as well. Oh, I have a pain, give me some drugs. This issue in my life, even a psychological thing, I'm sad all the time, give me some drugs. They're all like, I'm feeling something, whether it's physical, emotional, whatever. I actually want to make the sensation go away. But if you see the sensation, whatever it is, as a signal, it's actually, they're all benevolent. They're all there to serve you. So I'd say no emotion is bad at all. Anger, hate, rage, they're all fine. They're all signals. Like just because you feel anger or you feel hate or whatever, doesn't mean you're going to go kill someone. Like the action is problematic, very problematic. But feel the emotion, because usually you don't get to the level of rage unless you've been suppressing the anger. But if you feel the anger and you already start to, oh, what am I feeling powerless about? And you address it, it doesn't get to rage or anything. And so I think the first step for these people, like yeah, if you're in a startup world or you're like a success seeker person and you don't think emotions serve you, there's a lot of people who just say, oh, you don't want to be ruled by your emotion. And that's true insofar as whatever you're feeling, you don't want it to be in charge. You want to be in charge. But if you're suppressing your emotions because you don't like them, they are in charge, actually. If you're distracting yourself by work every day because you don't want to feel emotion, the emotion is in charge because you're constantly trying to avoid it. But if you sit there and allow the emotion and embrace it and say, what is this emotion telling me? Then you're actually using the emotion as a tool to help you navigate your life. And so...
That's very interesting. So let's take a step back and say, okay, you're 16 years old. Any advice you'd give that 16-year-old self?
Yeah, my wife and I have talked about this kind of stuff a lot as we are planning to have kids soon. And so we're like, okay, how do we bring this stuff we have that we weren't raised this way with this kind of stuff? So how will we raise a kid and what will we teach them? And I think for like a teenager, the real thing, one of the big ones is responsibility. I think responsibility plays out in our entire lives. And you actually see that in teenagers where they go from they suddenly start rebelling. So your parents are still telling you what to do, but you're like, I don't want you to tell me what to do anymore. So I want freedom. I want to make my own choices. But then you also aren't ready to take full responsibility and actually be on your own and face all the consequences. So it's this very complicated transition. And to me, the main core of it is going from someone else being responsible for me to me being fully responsible for me. And that's like what the teenage years really are. It's turbulent for that reason. So the main thing for a teenager I would be is like start to, and this is what most parents naturally do at varying levels of success, of helping the teenager like take more responsibility on their own and face the consequences of their choices and learn from them and be okay with that. And of course, at the same time, you're going to school and popularity is such a big thing. So you're constantly, and this gets to the idea of failing. A lot of the reasons we don't want to fail is because we don't want to be perceived as a failure. We think failure is bad and we don't want people to dislike us or judge us. And school at that age is all about people liking us and approving of us. And so you're at this place, you want to take responsibility, but at the same time, you're also afraid to fail or be disliked. So then you're actually constraining, you can't make these choices because you won't be liked. So to me, pretty much all parts of your life, and especially at that age, it's like accepting who you are and knowing that who you are is perfect as you are right now. And whatever your path is in life, you're where you need to be right now. And all the bad things that happen in your life, they had to happen for you to be where you are now. To the point where it's not just like, oh, I'm okay that these bad things happen. It's that they actually are what enabled me to be here. They were frankly like sacred. Like those moments are what taught me things. And those experiences are what led me to where I am now. Whether they're like really traumatic or whatnot, they're like, if I'm going to be happy about who I am now and who I'm going to be in the future, I have to actually appreciate what those experiences were and what I got out of them. Whatever pain it was or whatnot, it all led to you being where you are now. And if you're going to be happy with who you are now in the future, the pieces that all led you there must be appreciated.
I love it. Here's my last question. I end just about every podcast with this is, how would you like to be remembered?
Never thought about that. Right now, I would say, well, so that's a question. Because I think about it as in like, when I die, how would I want to be remembered? As in like, I meet somebody and I walk away, how do they remember me right afterwards?
However you want to take it too.
So I'm going to go with the more present one because I'm sure parts of my thought will change by the time I'm dying, presumably. So right now, how I want to be remembered is safe. It's one thing I think I've had a hard time with, especially with girlfriends in the past, and I had a girlfriend actually tell me this. She's like, I don't feel safe with you. And she didn't mean physical, like never, nothing around physical, but just like emotionally safe. And I learned over time that when I was with many of the women I was with, they would express their own emotions. And my response would usually be either one, how do I fix this emotion? Or you're wrong, you shouldn't feel that emotion. And both of those are bullshit because frankly, whatever emotion, like I'm just saying, whatever your emotion you're feeling is fine. It's actually great. They're signals. So this person I'm with has an emotion that's a signal and they're feeling it. The truth is that's great. Feel your emotion. It's a signal of some kind. And by them sharing it with me, that's great. I can be a part of their experience and I can, ideally, you hold space and allow that and you love them no matter what they're feeling. But I felt threatened by it all those years. So I would want it to go away. My goal is to make, just like I wanted my emotions to go away, I wanted their emotions to go away. So ultimately, I had this energy of they would feel an emotion and I would basically say, I don't like this emotion. And so ultimately that would make someone feel unsafe. So from that, it's like, I want people to be able to talk to me and say whatever and be whatever. They can even yell at me and scream at me and tell me I'm a terrible person. And the ideal situation is I'm cool with that. And I say, whatever your experience is fine. Even if it's hatred towards me, it's fine. And I accept you however you are right now. And so that they feel safe in being whatever they are.
I love it. That's it's very, very true, especially what you're doing. I mean, people need to feel safe when they're starting to explore these new areas of their emotions in their life and how they think through things. But Benjamin, it was a big pleasure to have you on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Daran.
I
enjoyed it.
Cheers.